Meeting of the Planning Commission, Monday, October 28th, 2019. We're going to all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please do. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome everyone to this Planning Commission meeting. If you're in the right place, this is the Planning Commission meeting, not the City Council meeting. And we are going to go through roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Moore?
Present.
Vice Chair Saxena?
Present.
Chairperson Wong?
Present.
Commissioner Fong is absent, and Commissioner Takashi is absent as well. Thank you.
All right, great. So first item is the approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
All right, is there a second?
I move to second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, we will go to vote. So there's discussion. Let's vote to approve the minutes. All right, the minutes approve 3-0-2 with 2 abstentions. Okay, let's go to oral communications. Let's see what we have. We've got cards. If you get a chance, please fill out the blue card. You've got 3 minutes. On your left, you can put that there on the stand where Dolly just dropped something off, and we will read those questions. You'll come up. We'll give you 3 minutes. If you hear the first beep, that means you've got, I think, 10 seconds to go. So remember how that works. Dark skies. Okay, Daniel Lords, I just want to make sure that you're coming up to speak to an agenda item. Is it a general item, or is it bird safe, or is it dark skies? Just want to make sure we're in the right agenda item. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's the right agenda item.
She wanted to talk on an item that's not on the agenda.
That's okay. We can bring her up too as well for that. That's what this open forum is for. So that's okay. So you're talking about dark skies and bird safe. Okay, so we'll do this later then. Okay, we'll give you a second card. Okay, cool. Charlene Lee, please come on up.
I want to talk about, maybe I should talk in city council meeting, but I want to put this into agenda of city council meeting because I was arrested at Montevista High. I just stood there for 10 minutes. I wear white dress, but Deputy Law, Jonathan Law say I wear black dress. I want to know why the police didn't take a photo on October 11, 2017. I want to put this into agenda, but I don't know if it's the right place to talk here or not. This is not right?
Yeah, this is the Planning Commission, so I think you probably want to show up to the City Council meeting. The next City Council meeting is...
Tomorrow, 5 o'clock?
No, it's in, I believe, 2 weeks, if that's correct.
2 weeks, okay, sorry.
So the next city council meeting will be on November 5th.
November 5th, thank
Correct.
you.
Or 1 week, yes. It's the first Tuesday and third Tuesday of every month. So thanks for being up here. Okay, well with that, let's move to our study sessions here. And study session item number 2 is the study session related to bird-safe development policies and guidelines. And so the recommended action here is to provide direction to staff on the areas of the regulation related to bird-safe development. So Director Fu, who do we have
Sure.
here today to
Yeah,
present?
we have a staff report for you. This, like you said, Chair, this is a study session related to our proposed bird-safe development policies and guidelines. So today what we will present is our research results and looking for your advice and direction on how you wish for us to move forward or any additional comments before we bring back a draft ordinance. With me, I have Associate Planner Ellen Yao, who will be giving you a brief presentation. All right. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. So tonight we're going to be talking about bird-safe development policies and guidelines. This was brought to the attention of City Council to incorporate into their work program. There's major concerns brought on by the Commission that we wanted to address bird deaths associated with our design and development decisions. So what we are aware of based off of research in the last couple of decades is that there's a significant amount of birds that are crashing and colliding into our buildings, whether they're tall, high-story buildings or even 2 to 3-story buildings, based mainly because of the material that we're using. So this is very important because birds are very critical creatures as part of our ecosystem. Some of the things that they do contribute is plant pollination, seed dispersal, and insect and rodent control. I'm just showing this bird migration route. So birds and their migratory patterns, the way they eat, how they fly and function within our ecosystem has been in place for millennia. This is how they operate. You can see that California, specifically the Bay Area, is within the Pacific Flyaway. We are located really close to bodies of water, which is really great for migrating birds to fly and use as a pit stop for grabbing water and continuing on their route. So birds have been doing this for quite some time, but the issue is we are developing in way of how they're flying. And the significant change is really our use of materials. Specifically, glass is becoming a very modern day material that we're using. So significant areas of buildings are now either reflective or transparent or even mirror glass. And so when we have these elements in our urban buildings, these birds are colliding and not able to see that they can die. In addition to that, I'm going to briefly talk about lighting as an issue as well. Birds are things like a landscape and lighting are what we call bird attractants. They bring birds to the area, and when they get confused with some of the bright lights, whether it's day or nighttime, it really causes an issue for them to crash into buildings and other structures. So one of the main things with bird hazards is the reflectivity of glass. You can even imagine yourself, crashing to a screen door. Birds are similar in the same way, but they're traveling at much faster speeds. So as you can see in these two images, you can see the reflection of the trees and the buildings behind, and then some of the landscaping in the next picture. Another thing is transparency. So in the image on the left, you can see landscaping on the other side, so they presume it's a clear passage for them to fly through. On the next picture onto the right, there's some landscaping in the middle, so that's also very confusing for birds. They feel like now they have this passage to fly through. It's clear, there's some bushes right there, and they can actually crash into the front of those glass facades. Another is lighting. So this is a nighttime image. As you can see, big glass in the front, landscaping, really much of a distractant for the birds. They feel like they can fly straight through. Some of cities that exist along these flyways that I showed earlier, in our area, San Francisco was the first to implement some policies. Santa Cruz, Oakland, Sunnyvale, and Alameda have some various forms of policies, whether it's codified or policies that they require upon building review. In my packet, you'd see that we also included Mountain View and San Jose. They mostly have it in some of their plans. Just most recently, San Jose has also updated their downtown plan to incorporate some bird-safe design. Previously, it was just limited to the Coyote Creek area just north of 237. So cities are continually changing. Most recently, Santa Cruz and Alameda just approved dark sky and bird-safe regulations. So we are not necessarily ahead, nor are we behind, but it's a consideration. So a main thing with the glazing, so different cities have approached it in various different ways. The main thing to focus on is the intent of the policies is to reduce bird strikes. So different cities have applied variables such as either prohibiting certain type of glass or limiting glass to a certain percentage or a certain height within a building. They've also provided regulations on treating glass, either 100% treatment on the entire facade or a percentage of treatment where big areas would require treatment and then entry doors, because they're smaller areas, could be excluded. So there's a spectrum of policies that can be put in place to address glazing. Another thing is to prohibit very specific types of glazing, whether it's in a kind of a corridor design or having two glass point to a certain area. So limiting certain design elements that are bird attractants. So some of the solutions that exist out there can be very creative. They actually, when they're built in with a new development, it's almost kind of net neutral cost. It's really patterns that they have applied to buildings. If we can see it, the birds can see it as well. So as you can see, some of these examples are just straight lines across or very decorative patterns. On the most right one is an image of Tracy Aviary, and they've done a mixture of different elements. They have dots on their glass. Also in front of the glass, they also broke it up with metal plating, also very decorative. So a couple more bird-safe solutions shown there. So they can come in various forms of film, netting, etching into the glass. In most cities, they've provided exemptions for certain buildings, and if you look in the attachment with other cities, you'll see that it comes in various forms. The big three categories that are usually exempted are historical buildings. Some cities have said if you're touching a historical part, that that doesn't, if you're not touching the historical part and you're just doing an addition, you would still need to make that change to the addition, but not to the older portions. There's exemptions for smaller residential buildings. So if it's just a standard single-family home and it's mainly made with regular materials, they can be exempted. But if it turns out to be a completely glass building, then it's not. So there's a variable in how specific the commission wants to guide the policy. There's also exemptions for retail frontages. We want to address bird concerns, but also the flexibility for tenants to get visibility into their storefront as well. So retail frontage, historical buildings, and residential buildings are often exempted. To go over, the next item actually is dark sky policies, but briefly in bird safe development requirements, generally they limit specific types of lighting, like event searchlights or lighting that doesn't have screening that blocks it up from going upwards. So that will be covered with some of the next item. There's also restrictions on lighting on the interior and exterior. Sometimes they'll cap hours. So some cities have allowed developers to say that the occupants will turn off the light at the end of the day, or that they'll pull down screens at the end of the night. But those are more behavioral based. It's a little harder to enforce than if it was an architectural element limiting lighting. So cities have different applicability options. They either apply it to all new buildings or new additions. Some have also incorporated remodels and retrofits as part of the requirements. I think if the commission was looking to be broad about their policies, including retrofits and remodels are kind of important because the city most of it's already built out. So some of the existing glass buildings that we have in the city could benefit from some of the glazing options. So gone through most of the general topics for bird safe. We're hoping that the commission can provide direction on some policy options on how they want to move forward in terms of mandatory or voluntary codified versus policy written standards. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and the research there from staff. Any comments from the commissioners?
Thank you, Ellen. I think that was a great report, and I really enjoyed reading through the materials. Could you repeat the last maybe 3 statements you made about the options that we have that we can be choosing to do tonight?
Yeah, so there's various options, but the main categories would be if you wanted to make it mandatory or voluntary. We can consider whether you want to codify it so it becomes incorporated into an ordinance and it's in our municipal code, or if you want it to just be a policy where applicants can see it as a handout. There are definitely pros and cons for either. It could also be a combination of those as well.
Yeah. Oh. I had a question about the architectural lighting and other things you mentioned. Are there any published standard architectural guidelines by like some industry association on how to do that lighting to address some of the concerns which are being raised?
Yeah, so there are many organizations, birder organizations, even something like the Audubon Society. We do have some people from Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society that can speak on their behalf as well. There are published articles on what those best practices are in terms of lighting and glazing and just overall building design. So yes, there are.
I would add something to this. I would encourage you that there's a really good report from the New York City Audubon Society, which you took. And what I really liked was Appendix, which actually on page 55 has some important things there. I think when they look at the area about region within a migratory route, it'd be good to understand where our migratory routes are first and use that as a place to determine when we go voluntary or non-voluntary. And then thinking about the proximate to migratory stopover destinations. So those 2 things on routing should be a good place to think about, hey, is there a frequency here that makes sense? And then that might help from a decision point on voluntary and non-voluntary. And then I think there's a lot of interesting measures or tests on that checklist that might serve as a good option. It sounds like you've seen it already.
Yeah, another thing to consider is aside from migratory birds, we also have local birds, songbirds that are here. So regardless of the migratory patterns, birds still live here, and they will see all aspects of a building. Sometimes cities have limited facade changes just to north-south because they imagine, well, they're just going that way, but birds are kind of everywhere, so, yeah.
Okay, so I do want to add on to that, because I do live in an Eichler, and I have glass that is between 8 and 10 feet, clear story, and I have had birds run into it, and if I keep the shades drawn, it doesn't occur. And I've also seen this, happen in office buildings too, especially and particularly if you have trees that are close to the window. If it's about like 15 feet away, then the birds, they'll run right into the glass because that's their habitat is now placed really close to it. So I agree that it isn't just the migratory birds that have an issue. And when I think about the migration, the lighting, to me, seems very important, controlling that with regards to the migratory birds. I was wondering if we could pull up the matrix that had the other cities and take a look.
We'll have to pull up on a separate machine. So if you want to continue with your line of discussion, we can pull that up for you.
Yeah, I had some more questions about the glass guidelines. Like from what I can infer is both transparent and reflective are a problem, but a glass which is dark, which essentially doesn't allow them to see through, is not a problem, right? Does that have repercussions on like a climate, like reflectivity and heating and cooling of buildings? And are there designs where they could interleave or something where they can get the benefits of what like the reflective or the transparent glass provides while giving enough visual signals to birds to not crash into those, like patterns or other things which can be done?
So for your first question, if the glass was opaque, yes, it's pretty much like patterns. If it's an opaque one, they can see it and they won't crash into it. I mean, if we were to draw, I believe, those shades up there, I think it has some level of opacity to it, so you can't actually see through. We have shades pulled down right now. But the concern with some of the certain opaque glasses, if they're actually mirrored glass, because that is 100% reflectivity. Yeah.
And does it impact the building's energy consumption and those kind of things?
Well, studies have shown glass is one of the materials that LEED certification, they do promote use of that, but there is a certain threshold that if you exceed maybe believe it's about 30 to 40% of glass with an entire building, you're actually losing some benefits from the heating and cooling. So there's a delicate balance.
And so the choice between opaque and reflective glass, does it have an impact there?
Impact on the...
Like the LEED certification or the overall energy consumption of a building?
I don't know the specifics on that.
Thanks.
There was also in the materials that you provided some information about if they had overhangs on the buildings and how that would reduce the energy consumption and also decrease the amount of reflection because you didn't have the direct light. So that would be another alternative that would, help with the reducing energy consumption. Did you happen to get that matrix?
Yes.
To look at?
So while you're doing that on the matrix, there doesn't seem to be a delineation between different types of buildings, commercial, residential, office. in terms of these standards that other cities have put out. Do we have any more details about that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question is really about delineation between these policies for commercial, residential, and office.
There's not much delineation between commercial and office and industrial. The only distinction between that and residential is for the smaller residential home where glazing generally is limited. Oftentimes you see large facades of glass on these larger buildings, and you'll have, they're either commercial or office buildings, not oftentimes of residential. So the policies that are written don't really have that as a defining differentiation.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? Your point, you wanted to do? Okay. All right. I'll just leave my laptop.
I think while we continue to get that up here, if you want to continue discussion, or if you want to open the public comment, you can do that as well. Yeah, we can circle back to this one too.
You can do that too. You can pop that up on the page.
There was actually a bird-safe building checklist in one of the large documents on PDF 48, which was pretty interesting. And they did also suggest there was a website you could go to at the American Bird Conservancy, which had different glazing treatment options that residents could do. So that was a couple of items that I'd like to see shared.
Okay. Should we just open to public comment? Put it up. Yeah, that's good. All right, let's open up to public comment here. All right, Daniel Leeds, followed by Connie Cunningham, followed by Jamie Jang. Oh yeah, put them up, we'll get to them. All right, you got 3 minutes. If you hear that little beep, I think you got like 10 seconds to go, so there you go.
Cool.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dashel Leeds.
Oh, Dashel, sorry about that.
It's all right. I write kind of small. I'm a volunteer environmental advocate for the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I'd really like to thank you for your presentation. It was awesome, and we are fully supportive of this study item today. You know, birds are sort of, you know, there's that expression, canary in a coal mine, and it's really true. We look to birds as a signal for a healthy ecosystem. And when we see bird populations in such serious decline, I think we've lost about 30% of bird abundance since 1970, and that's really shocking and frightening. I think that these bird-safe policies are really straightforward. They're effective. They've been proven in many cities, and we think that they're going to be a really great way of protecting our ecosystem. And I would like to sort of make some suggestions. Consider discussing the possibility of combining the bird safe and dark sky items, particularly with regards to lighting requirements, as there's going to be a lot of overlap between them, and maybe it makes sense to have it as 2 items, maybe it makes sense to have it as 1. That should be discussed. We ask that you please make the bird safe techniques mandatory rather than voluntary. Developers kind of build what they know and they'll do what they're used to. So I think if we had voluntary guidelines, we wouldn't really see the adoption that we would like to see of these techniques. It was mentioned earlier that these could apply to retrofits, and we're supportive of that, specifically to retrofits that change, for example, more than 30% of a building's outer facade. And then also consider incorporating other structures that are not explicitly buildings, such as bridges and skyways and other structures that commonly include transparent glass into these set of requirements. Thank you so much for studying this item, and again to staff for all of your hard work on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dashel. Our next speaker is Connie Cunningham.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members, as well as staff. I too thank you for that excellent report. I was very excited earlier this year when the City Council added to its work agenda this particular action item for bird safety construction, as well as the dark skies. That says something a lot to me about the leadership that our city takes in environmental issues. I know that we've stepped out smartly on the all-electric and sustainable energy sources. And so this is another aspect to me of the leadership that our city is willing and actively taking. This little guy, can you see him? He's a red-crowned kinglet, and he lives within a short walk from my house. He lives in a tall silver green conifer tree. He's 4 inches long, period. And then his little wings are like about that size as well. So although he's not a canary, and canaries are not in our country naturally, but he is. And he lives here, and he has to sleep outside in the cold, and he has to sleep outside in the rain and the wind and all that. So it's really wonderful to think that our city is trying to mitigate some of the natural problems that he has, plus any human-caused ones. What I was thinking, strong rollout on these issues. I like the term mandatory because I agree with the young man who just spoke that things do tend to go along the way you're used to going along, and you use the spliers you do and those kinds of things. So making them mandatory is very good. I noted specifically the exceptions, which was historical buildings, retail frontages, and small residential. And yet what we saw in this wonderful report is how creative people can be in protecting the birds from the windows, whether it's a historical building, whether it's small, whether it doesn't have to be expensive. It just needs to be something that creates a barrier for the birds seeing a window and running into it, or some other issue with that building. So I don't think that we need those exceptions. So a strong rollout, say there's something that, for some reason, when I didn't see one that hit me right away, but if there is something that needs rollout, like, oh yeah, the first year you would do X and the second year do Y and so forth, that we make that clear in this report so that you don't have to revisit it next year, that you say, okay, step 1 is, and then next year we'll do that, and it's accepted all at one time. And lastly, I wanted to say that I think outreach and education to the public should be made a real important part of this. I just visited some very dear friends down in Southern California, and they have a home that overlooks the ocean, and they have a little door, not a little door, but sliding glass door that opens. And she was saying, oh, we have neighbors across the way. They took out that whole wall and put all glass. And I'm like, oh, what? My mind exploded thinking of the birds coming, because they already do on a smaller door. So I would say that education and outreach is a really important step so that everyone becomes as familiar and concerned about our little friend here as say I am. Okay.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Connie. We've got Jamie, Keith, and then Margaret to come up. So let's start with Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an architecture professional and student, and bird safe design, I think, is definitely the way to go. Before I get into the reasons why, and the 2 previous public speakers also, I think, gave great reasons why, I'm curious, I don't know, this might be unorthodox, but I'm curious what your positions are in general on environmental stewardship. So if I could donate some of my 3 minutes to hear what you guys generally feel about environmental stewardship as representatives.
I don't think we can do
So
that.
unfortunately, this is the time
Okay.
where you get to speak.
Okay,
They don't
that's great.
respond.
Well,
But they choose to respond afterwards, they can.
Great.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Thank you, though. Thanks for giving us time.
No problem. So I guess a big reason why I ask about that is because bird safe design is just a part of what I think you guys really should be focusing on. It's incredibly important, the web of life, everything's interconnected, all of that, right? That's kind of what I'm curious if you guys really find that espousing or provocative for you. It's, I think I didn't really come up here with much of an idea of what to say. But yeah, bird safe design, it's just a step, and that's kind of what I want to get
Well,
in
tell
your
us how you incorporate that in your work today.
In my work today, I don't. It's why I think governments are so important, because as someone alluded to before, status quo will carry on, especially in a place as wealthy as Cupertino. Glass is the fad. People want as much glass as possible to showcase what's going on at their beautiful view. Unfortunately, sometimes a beautiful view might be a bird flying into the glass.
I had a follow-up question. Are there
Yes.
published architectural guidelines, like architectural standards or something which the city could adopt?
Yeah, so I believe that was asked and answered already, and then there's the American Conservancy of Birds.
No, from the architectural side of, not from the Audubon Society.
Yeah, so in terms of like codes and things, I would probably defer to Daschle. I bet he can give you a lot of really great tangible items to
No problem.
to
I
focus
think
on.
you're talking about AIA codes. That
Yeah, something
American
like
Institute.
AIA
which is like
codes.
standardized, which
I'm not aware of any of those. But yeah, it's the role of the governments to recognize the greater role that the economy can't control, and controlling glazing and facades is just a part of what I think you guys should be responsible for. So thank you.
Thank you for coming up here. Appreciate it. Keith, followed by Margaret, followed by Shani.
Hi, you probably recognize me, right? So I'm here representing myself, okay? I do work for the city, right, at McClellan Ranch Preserve, and have experience with the Environmental Education Center there with fretted glass that we use there.
What is fretted glass?
It has lines in it, and the impact is, you can see outside fine, and on all the windows, we have big panes of glass in the Environmental Education Center, and you're welcome to come out and check it out. And the birds, we don't have bird strikes on any of those windows, right? We have had issues with a tiny triangular window above the door, and they'll hit that. They'll come in under the eaves and blink right into it. So we covered that up with paper, rice paper, and haven't had a problem since, right? So it's efficient, right? And it prevents them from getting into it, because it's we're up against all the trees and oaks and stuff around there. So if it were reflecting, we'd have a lot more for certainly. So that's a good thing. I think the issue with glass is totally energy inefficient. If you're building a big building, we're talking about energy all the time, and to heat those buildings, right? To cool those buildings, the loss through glass. The glass is a totally inefficient insulator, right? And so we're talking about saving energy in the future and stuff. It's just smart not to use glass, right? Glass is also something, it's cheaper. That's why, people like to use it, right? If we get people that want to build a building, if we say you can't use glass, then that ups their cost, right? So I think giving them the option in our rules is probably a bad idea, because the majority of the time they're going to go whatever's cheapest, right? And to get what they want and make more money. It's kind of a greed thing, right? So the fretted glass is excellent. The other thing, quick dark sky, I'll throw it in here because I think they're associated. I also work at Lick Observatory and have since 1996, and have seen the valley lights grow. I was up there on Saturday night. I could see the smoke lit by all the beautiful lights that we have. And there's so much inefficiency in the way we use lighting at night. All it needs to do is face downward. Doesn't need to light a giant building, right? Those windows up there, if we put glass, that is all light that comes out. If somebody's in their office, boom. Sometimes they light the whole building just for the sake of lighting it. I don't know what that means. Did I say the Jeopardy question? Right?
You got 15
magic
seconds.
Word?
You got 15 seconds.
Okay.
But you haven't won the lottery,
But
so you're
yeah,
okay.
yeah, sorry. Thank you. And so anyway, just some thoughts. Feel free to check it out, the fretted glass there, and talk to Barbara Banfield, who's been there for 30-something years, and she can tell you all about it. She's an excellent person to deal with. Anyway, thank you. Awesome meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Keith. All right. Margaret, followed by Shani, and Lisa.
Hi, my name is Margaret Heinbaugh, and I want to thank Ellen for the really nice presentation. Thank you, I really liked it. I want to support everything that has been brought up during the presentation and by other people that have spoken. I'm here on behalf of Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society as well. And I really would like Cupertino to join the other cities that have bird-safe design and actually maybe try to make sure that it's very, they're strong, strong, whatever, restrictions that they impose, maybe, I guess, if you want to think about it. As Dash mentioned, that there's a decline or has been a decline in bird population in the past, and this is only going to be increasing more as in the future with climate change and all of the other stresses that are going to be put on birds. So the more we can do now, the better. And it's not just during migration that this is occurring. I also have a very small house with just one big, large glass pane in the front near a tree, and we have gotten bird strikes there. So it's not just the big old, big giant buildings with glass which are causing problems, but also residential houses and anything which has that type of glass in it. So just wanted to say that, and I do agree that it should be mandatory. That's all.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In your studies in the Audubon as well, is there a correlation between housing density and bird density decline?
Oh, I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Shani might know.
All right. Well, she's up soon.
Yeah, thanks.
So, all right. Thank you. Anyone else have questions on the commission? Okay. All right. Shani, welcome.
Hello. I'm Shani Kleinhaus. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. We're located at McClellan Ranch. I've been there for a long time. I wanted to really thank Ellen for talking to me about this and reaching out. That was really very, very good. And I thought she made an excellent presentation. Two things that one thing happened after I met with her just a few days ago, which is the city of Mountain View just included in their REACH codes, which are aimed to conserve energy in buildings, bird-safe design citywide, with only exception is small houses. So by now, every building that is larger than a small house in Mountain View would have to do bird-safe design. There are many, many ways to do it. Obviously, the best thing is to reduce the amount of glass, but glass is very, very fashionable. So we have to protect the birds, especially in a city where people love the birds, like here. We have a lot of members in Cupertino, and we have a lot of people who come to the shop, and a lot of kids that get educated. And every one of them knows and have seen a bird that hit the window. And when you look at national statistics, they're talking about almost 1 billion birds a year, and it's not recoverable. And it's not only buildings. It can be a bridge. It can be a bus stop. It can be all sorts of glass barriers that we put, and the birds don't see them. There are a lot of best practices already, and what Audubon would ask you to recommend is to require mandatory bird-safe design and to use the best practices from every possible place. In some cities, you have a lot of development of big buildings, and then the developers will come and say, no, it's going to be too expensive. What we find is that it's not too expensive when you do it from the start. If you try to retrofit afterwards, because you have a lot of collisions, that is prohibitively expensive, and then they don't do it. So starting from guiding that tells them from the start that they have to do it, they will. And the solutions are there, and they're not too expensive, and they're reasonable. There is a LEED standard for bird-safe design. It's a pilot LEED 55. It's very, very complicated to achieve that because of the way they calculate. So most do bird-safe design and don't ask for the LEED credit because it's just complicated way So, and lastly, glass. There is the American Association of Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Engineers, and maybe I'm getting it backwards, actually says that the optimum of glass building for heating and cooling versus the light that comes into the building is 30 to 40% of the glass surface to be of the surface to be glass, not more than that. After you get to that, the efficiency and the energy savings go down. So if you really want it to be sustainable, then tell people to build out of wood, not out of concrete, and no glass. Thank you.
We're out of time, but for those referencing, that's the ASHRAE
Yeah,
standard.
that one.
And the LEED standard is the 55, I believe.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
We have two more speakers, Peggy Griffin and Lisa Warren.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. This has to do with landscaping. I know that you're talking about buildings, but we need a variety of types of trees, and I see that we're getting more and more Chinese pistache and pears, and all the really big trees are going. 2 days ago, I live right behind the Apple Infinity Loop by Lawson Middle School. We had 2 eagles, and I don't know if this will show up.
Oh, wow. Oh.
You can see it there. There were 2 of them, and these you can't imagine seeing one of these in a Chinese pistache. The whole limb would come down. And these big birds and big owls, they take care of rats and squirrels, population. So when you're looking at a design of a project, you need to preserve the big trees or have them replace them with equivalent big trees and not just your palm, so that we have a variety of birds and a more variety of trees, because then you get the variety of birds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa.
Hi. So, sorry, I got stuck at work. I will watch the presentation from home when it's available, but I wanted to at least speak. I can't speak to the presentation, but I have been in support of having this conversation in the first place, which I'm really glad you are, since Dashiell started coming to meetings, and I felt this way years ago. I, in fact, spoke to Audubon Society several years ago, a couple times, pertaining to Main Street and some other issues. So really glad you're having this conversation, and I just wanted to say, it's not just the Audubon Society people, it's normal, ordinary people that value anything you can do to keep our whole environment less concrete, less glass, etc. Not just for the birds, but for several reasons, and that's a very good one. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Lisa.
There's another Lisa, which I filled out a form. I don't know.
Is it for dark skies or for
No,
for
it's for birds.
Okay, please come up.
Okay, thank you. I'm Lisa Karpinski. I've worked with actually the Audubon since 1995. I was chair of the Environmental Action Committee for a number of years and chair of the Burrowing Owl Committee. And I'm also a Sunnyvale resident and grew up here. So I'm one of the few natives left, unfortunately. But one of the things I just wanted to point out is that I've sort of watched the bird populations decline just from my memories of being a kid in 1962 when I was born, and just noticing the numbers falling. And I actually also read that recent study. They did a bird count where they found that they think there's been about a 30% drop in bird population since the 1970s, which is shocking, and people don't know exactly why, but habitat loss is probably one of the main causes of the bird loss. And basically and looking to some of the other cities that are either have adopted bird safe design, aspects of bird safe design, I commend you for looking into this. And I was thinking about the question about glass, and it is actually more expensive to put in lines in glass, so that's a concern for architects. But what I imagine is that given how entrepreneurial and inventive this area is, that the Silicon Valley is in terms of coming up with ideas and mitigations, and that if there's a will, if there's a political will to actually try to resolve this issue or improve habitat for birds, I think it's absolutely possible. It just requires that we prioritize it as a community. And the city of Cupertino would be setting a great example in being part of the list of cities that are actually deciding that this is an important issue. And then the questions about density of housing, which is a very good one, whether that increases bird death, what to do about glass in terms of heating and the possibility of issues around cooling buildings and problems with that. As somebody else said, ledges is a possibility of reducing the need for glass. That I think there's a lot more that we can actually determine and find out if we put our attention and energy on this issue. And that given the resources we have here with Google, et cetera, we've got some very entrepreneuring and smart people that could come up with good solutions. So I encourage you to continue looking into this. And actually, I agree with the mandatory, once you come up with a set of standards, to make them mandatory, because voluntary, unfortunately, people won't adopt them because it's outside of their norm. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for coming by. Okay, I think we see if there's any discussion on the commissioner side here. So, any other questions you might want to pose, people?
Is Shawnee still? Yes. Oh, okay, so I went to Facebook. There was a bird count on the roof. Yes, okay. And they had a combination of fritting, and they also had like stripes. And could you comment on which one of those was more effective, if you know?
Any kind of visual cue that the bird that we can see, the bird can see, is effective. At Facebook, most of the building that they have now has these dots. And if anybody else wants to join our bird count, just let me know, and you can see with us. So the dots work, but in areas where you can see through the glass from one side to the other, and there's vegetation on the other side, like right next to the roof, it hasn't been as strong as we would have liked, and they still had some collisions, and the lines seem to be working better. So in a situation where you have a skyway, for example, I would not use glass, but should you use glass, use lines. Whereas in a regular window, dots are usually enough. There's also a lot of other patterns you can use, and in some areas they use louvers that are vertical and also are used for the glare. In other areas, they use louvers that are horizontal. There are many ways to do it, and I don't really think we should really prescribe very clearly. I think I would look at what is out there and just look at the best solutions that you can get, and just put together the best ordinance that you can get. Google, in their buildings that is just now being complete, is using dots. Microsoft and Intuit are using lines, horizontal lines. The Google building is not finished yet, so you can't see it. And and also the Microsoft one is not finished. But Broadridge built one in North Bay Shore and Intuit, where they use lines that are about an inch apart, a little more, and that works fine. And they've told us that they see the birds coming and veering away. So obviously, I'm sure there's still some, but it seems to be effective. One building in Palo Alto that had a completely alternative way of dealing with it, it's a reflective glass, and they have some kind of a metal mesh or lines that come down and are reflected in the glass. So they actually use the reflection as a bird mitigation. So you can be creative, but you have to provide a visual, something that the birds can see. The estimates of almost a billion birds that die every year, a lot of it is in homes. And mostly it's because there's more homes than big buildings. But if the fashion of having more and more places where you can see through the corners or through a walkway or a skyway or a balcony, those things need to really be protected. And for a city like Cupertino, there's not a lot of very dense high rises that are all in one place. So almost anywhere, you have a lot of migratory birds going through here. And in this area, the birds don't all fly in like one line. They fly really, really broad. So we get them anything from the bay to the ocean. And yes, near open space and creeks and the bay, they'll be expected to have more. And that's why with Facebook it was so important, or with Intuit, or with Google, or the other big companies, that they should do something. But they would be a pretty broad front, and just like that little ruby-crowned kinglet that you saw earlier, these birds don't nest here. They come here in winter and they stay for a while. So anyway, I hope that answers.
It does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as a matter of process, are we going to be recommending something today, or?
Any suggestions, any thoughts you have will be appreciated. We'll come back to you with a proposed ordinance for you to review further down the line. But anything that's on your mind, just let us know.
Okay, so decision at this moment on a process basis is just ideas for that criteria that would fit into an ordinance is kind of what we're providing input here to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view is that if there's standards which have already been established and recognized and accepted by the architecture or the bird community, we should probably try and standardize and reduce the scope for differing interpretations of things. So that would be my one suggestion to the city staff, is to see if we can codify. If you're going to go the codified route, do something which removes ambiguity and sets clear standards for the builders to follow, instead of they thinking, okay, like, what do I do here? And be worried about interpretations and doing things which don't meet, like making an effort but still not meeting the requirements of what we want to achieve, and not getting a sense of they're getting bogged and lost and being unsure about what they need to do here. And like, see, the Googles and the Facebooks and Microsoft probably have big architects working for them who have a lot of experience, but there might be smaller projects where their overall budget for figuring out all these issues may not be as deep, and that's where well-established guidelines which are generally accepted by the communities would really help.
Commissioner?
Okay, I'm just going to share some of the notes that I took going through the materials we were provided. One was from Santa Cruz. They talked about the proximity to natural features, and to me, we have a man-made feature now at Apple Park, basically a 176-acre park, and I would want to see that the area around that would have some special requirements, because now you've got a huge habitat that wasn't there like it was before. I did see some of the cities didn't seem to have requirements for the historic buildings, but then there were images where they had used netting that you couldn't even see in the picture. So I think that we can actually incorporate it into any historical buildings here in a way that isn't going to visually detract. We do have a lot of homes that are near, the hillsides, Rancho San Antonio, and in that area, and I'm wondering if there aren't some special requirements that should be made for those parts of the city. And because I am in an Eichler, I would actually want to have that explored about if there is remodeling done to a house, like mine, which has so much glazing. Could there be some requirement to provide bird-safe design? And essentially, you'd be retrofitting something using, for instance, some of the adhesive materials that they had at the American Bird Conservancy site. And, some of them are they're really attractive, and they actually add to the design. I am a little concerned, or I have a question about when buildings get really tall. It seemed like they were focusing in on buildings which, were 60 feet or lower, but we have, right now, supposedly, we're going to end up with 7 towers between 22 and 24 stories, and a 4-story glass-fronted pedestrian bridge over Wolf. And I was wondering if there are some special requirements that should be added architecturally to the glazing, because the towers are fully glazed, and they're very tall, up to 250 feet, and the pedestrian walkway is all glass front. So as it stands now, I don't know of any requirements to make that bird safe, and I was wondering if we add something in, can it be done before permits get pulled? And I thought the idea of having it combined, having these requirements combined with the reach codes, that's interesting to me. And when you talk about getting in the tall canopy trees, we're getting into some of the earlier discussions we had about pollinator pathways. And it seems almost like you'd want your pollinator pathways, your native tall canopy trees, your lighting, and your bird-safe design, all of that to work together. So you're helping with the environment, and then all around, making them, a place to live, and then a safe place to live. And then there were a couple photos which I'm not going to show, but they had photos in the package of the dead birds, and it was really sad. So now, something I mentioned earlier, they had a bird-safe checklist in the package, and I was wondering if something like that could be developed for homeowners now, and then also for when developers come in, if we're going to codify these requirements, if that can, a nice simple checklist like we have done for some of these other requirements that we have, and also provide access to the resources like the American Bird Conservancy, so people know, like if I want to go out now and put some fridding on my glass, and so I can keep the shades open, so that other people will know about that, and they can do it voluntarily once we have some education about that. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add a couple things here. Where we have applicable locations, glazing standards, and lighting standards, I think there's probably a column around landscaping standards that you might want to add that will capture some of the elements. So whether it's near trees, near water bodies, capture that there as opposed to the applicable locations. It might give you something there. And then with the applicable locations, I think it'll be good to, when you bring it back to us, so that we understand the impact to different types of business. So retail, residential, commercial. Thinking about that impact, there might be size limits or certain sites that we might want to think through as to where it becomes voluntary, non-voluntary, and what phases. So I think that's going to be important for people to be able to discuss. Maybe we do it all at once, make it easy, right? But I think there may be some commissioner members that may want to think about how that gets phased. And then there's one last piece. I think I've seen enough stuff around antennas, spires, and guide wires. So with a lot of satellites and things that are going there, so we might want to think about where those fit in the plan.
Kind of a general question about how we can codify the requirements and yet have it be flexible, so that if the developer wants to do the overhangs, or they want to do, the vertical bar lines, or anything,
Yeah, we don't want to force people to do dots if something else works better like that. So in that regard. And it also keeps people from experimenting to see what does work or what doesn't. So. All right, anything else on our end?
No, I think those are great comments. We'll certainly take a look at that and incorporate them into our next phase. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. Let's move on to agenda item number 3. Study session related to dark sky policies and or standards. Recommending action, provide direction to staff and potential policies and or standards for lighting regulations. So who do we have here from our staff?
Sure. So similar to the bird safe item that you just reviewed, this is also placed by City Council into our department, Community Development Department's work program, also with your suggestion as well. So we're here today with the Senior Planner, Eric Serrano, provide you a brief presentation on similar to the bird safe. So our research results, getting some comments and feedback from you as well as the public before we come back with an ordinance. So with that, I'll turn that over to Eric.
Good evening, Commissioner. So as Ben mentioned, I will be presenting on a study session for dark sky policies and standards. So the dark sky policies and standards was part of the 2019-20 work program. Light pollution really did become a problem in the 1970s. Astronomers really started to notice the effects of night sky on night watching. And so you see that becoming an issue as, cities grew, suburban sprawl, that kind of thing led to it. Out of that, the dark sky movement arose to help preserve and protect the nighttime environment through reasonable outdoor lighting. So the intent of dark sky regulations is to permit reasonable lighting, prevent light pollution and intrusion, reverse degradation of the night sky, and to help to protect the natural environment. So we do have current regulations that do control lighting. So we have regulations in our general commercial and within our city's parking ordinance. So these typically apply for any new construction or any new building improvements. So obviously new building, but if someone came in to do a new parking lot and they needed new lights, they would be complying with our parking regulation standards. So one of the things that we look for is lighting color, which is to be white light. Fixture orientation, everything's supposed to be orientated and designed to preclude any light from going off-site and pointed downward. Light fixtures are to have a uniform intensity, so you don't really have one area that's really brighter than the other. Essentially, it kind of looks even throughout, and then the idea is that it kind of darkens out at the edges, so it doesn't spill over into the adjacent properties. We do allow for greater lighting in critical areas, so things like stairwells, walkways, ATM machines, things like that, where lighting might be more useful for a user. In our residential hillside zones where we do have some residential lighting standards. So we do limit outdoor lighting to be directed to meet a particular need. So don't point it to anything that's random. We do ask for motion activated lights limited to 100 watts and shielded to avoid intrusion. Again, one of the big things you'll see common in lighting standards is the downward and shielded. That's a big component of it. It really helps prevent and really focus the lights at a particular use. Another limitation is that we prohibit high-intensity lighting on recreational courts, so tennis courts. Typically, there's no lighting allowed for those types of uses. So in our analysis, we see the applicability happening in various different zones. But generally, well, not generally, all new developments require that they comply with new lighting standards. That's a blanket thing that's pretty consistent. Some areas allow for nonconformity to continue until a new fixture permit is required, so you kind of keep going until something's triggered a new light. Other cities require conformance by a particular date. Some uses sooner than others, so you'll see like a tiered rolling effect. So single family might be first, followed by multifamily, by commercial, because kind of think the more complex ones take a little bit more time to get into conformance. Fixture type, so you limit lighting based on the type of use and location. So you want to limit height, like for instance, you'll limit height of lighting at the entrance to 8 feet. No point in having an entrance that has a 20-foot light because it might not be accessible, might not be lighting in the right area. Pedestrian walkways, 5 to 8 feet. Why have a 20-foot light for somebody that's 5-6 feet tall? Parking lot lighting, where it might make more sense, where it's a bigger area. You might have something that's 15 to 20 feet. Various types of lighting fixtures can be used, so most cities require outdoor illumination to be shielded and directed downward. This, again, prevents intrusion to adjacent properties and really focus on illuminating the correct area. Don't illuminate something that you don't want. These are some examples of acceptable and unacceptable lighting fixtures. Again, you'll see a common thing, pointed downwards, shielded. That's the big thing with lighting standards, that don't light other things. So lighting controls, you'll see a lot of lighting controls as part of this. So it allows for lights to be on for a certain amount of time. So motion sensors, you're concerned about something moving outside. So you have a motion sensor, but that turns off when it's not being used. Photocells, if it's too bright, it turns off the light. Timers, only from 7 to 9 or what have you, you'll have your lights on. There's also prohibited lighting, so uplighting, floodlights, searchlights, exposed bulbs, so even string lights some cities will prevent and say those are prohibited. Aerial lasers, and then lights above the horizontal plane. Again, the shield is a big factor in this. So there are exceptions as well. So holiday lights, lighting for signs, and in Cupertino, signs have their own lighting standards, so there's an illumination intensity that they can't exceed. They're required to be turned off by a certain time, so we deal with that way. Accent lighting in the public rights-of-way, so street lights, our parking lot lights, something like that. We are kind of working towards, the city's working towards, I think it's more of a best practice where you do just naturally shield lights. You see it happening more and more, but there are still lighting that is coming into play that our old street lights might not be the newest and greatest, but they're kind of moving into that transition. There's also lighting that requires a hearing. So it's typically for things that are considered unnecessary. So landscape lighting, why necessarily do you need that? You'll see sometimes they'll have a staff approval, or let's say you want just spotlights for whatever reason. You might have that if a residential use go through a design review committee kind of thing, or if it's a bigger development, then it'll go to like a planning commission, something like that. That kind of gives it a different threshold, kind of a tiering system. It's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or no, this is a big deal. It needs to go to a bigger body for discussion. So our next steps, again, to receive direction on the standards. We'll develop a regulatory program, do some outreach, and then draft the ordinance and bring that back to the Planning Commission. And that's it.
Thank you much. So, any questions from the commissioners?
Actually,
You good? Okay. I have no questions. Pretty straightforward. Thank you very much. Let's see what we have from the community. All right, and I got your name right. Dashiell, you're up first. Sorry about that. Dashiell, followed by Shani, followed by Connie, Jamie, and then that's it.
That's right, it's a tricky name. It's got a silent I in there too as well. Hello, Dashiell Leeds. I'm a volunteer environmental advocate for the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. We are interconnected with our environment, and we've evolved for millions of years with natural cycles of light and dark, and we've developed, along with almost every other living species on this planet, a very sensitive circadian rhythm. And our modern society kind of throws that haywire for us humans, and that can lead to some really serious health impacts. There was a study of workers who were routinely, their circadian rhythms were disrupted due to their work patterns, and they found that those people had higher rates of cancer. So this is something that, if it occurs over a prolonged period of time, it can have pretty serious health consequences. So it's a good preventative measure to make sure that we are keeping our circadian disruption to a minimum for our residents. And, of course, this goes without saying that for the other living beings on this planet that we share space with, that artificial light at night can be even more harmful to them than it is even to us. Birds can get trapped in beams of light. The term for it is capture, and they can get exhausted, and that delays their migratory flight paths, and they can even just crash into the ground and die. Artificial light can also affect the foraging patterns of species. With certain light thresholds, certain species of amphibians, for example, won't even forage, and bats will avoid certain pathways if there's lighting there. So I think we can really improve the health of our residents and our ecosystem by adopting these policies. And the night sky is beautiful. I think that, you know, we really have a right to be able to look at the stars and wonder about the universe. Thank you.
Thank you. Shani?
Thank you. Shani Kleinhaus again with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Light is primordial. We're cued to respond to light. All our biological systems are cued to respond to light. And wavelength matters a lot. There are some wavelengths that are attractive to birds, some that are attractive to insects. Part of why we're losing the insects from the planet, other than that we spray them, is white lights and blue lights. So when we think about how to have a healthy place for people and for everything else, we really have to think about how do we light up the ecosystem and the world around us. Birds, migration is triggered by skylight. So we speak about birds, but from my personal experience, since they changed to LED, the street light near me, I have to have really heavy curtains, and I can't keep the windows open anymore. And it makes a big difference. So anything from street light to office light, try to minimize how much light escapes to the environment. And there are things that you can do behaviorally. There are things that can be operationally. You can say, okay, we have sensors. Well, in some office buildings, I've seen that they're setting it up for 10 minutes, assuming the cleaners will come and go, and people who sit there, then they change it like for an hour or whatever. So the more that you can put into structures rather than behavior and operations, the better it is. So you can require, for example, that there is blinds that come down at 11 p.m. or something, or that lights at the top of a garage are turned off, but are only like censored for safety issues. Also, the height of lighting, like for paths, you can put just a low, like knee level, and for other things you need. So there's a lot of ways to and there's both. The Audubon Society has a lot of good recommendations, and the Dark Sky, International Dark Sky Association, and a lot of it was summarized by your excellent presentation here. So there's a lot that can be done, and thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question as well? So is there any guidelines on the balance between public safety lighting and the lighting that's required to balance out for the birds?
I've seen one study that was done by the University of Washington on their campus, I think, and I can find it for you guys, which actually showed, and it's counterintuitive in many ways, that the contrast matters, and that when you have brighter contrast, it's not as safe. And there are more people hiding in the dark or something, I don't know, like the contrast, actually you don't want too much contrast between the paths that people walk on and their environment. You need enough light so people can see, but you don't want to kind of make it so they can't see what's hiding in the bushes. So that was one study. I haven't seen a lot of that, but that study from Washington was actually really good. And I don't remember if they actually looked at it themselves, but one of their recommendations for best practices was not to have too much of a contrast.
Okay.
So I think that kind of answers your question. There's other recommendations for wavelength and for the heat emissions from the light. So there are a lot of different things that you can do in terms of the lumens and the intensity of the light, in terms of the wavelength, and in terms of the contrast.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Connie, followed by Jamie, followed by Lisa Warren.
Good evening again, commissioners and chair. I didn't say my name last time. Connie Cunningham, city resident for 32 years. I'm also a member of the Audubon Society since 2011. I'm a bird lover, and I'm also a human. And when you read these dark skies, particularly, you see that our little friend here is indeed a canary in the coal mine. A lot more information is available to you from everyone else here, but that we don't recognize that we're hurt by this light. But if we can realize that they are and then make the changes and it helps us, isn't that nice? You know, we help the birds and then we also help ourselves. If you go to a national park, like we did just recently to Wawona Park, and you look up and, oh my gosh, there's stars up there and they're beautiful. It's something that would be really nice if we in Cupertino led the charge enough that there might be a place within our city that we could see starlight from here. Again, I think a strong educational outreach component of this policy would be really important for getting even more people on board than are currently on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Jamie.
Hi. So I want to lead off with something I was just asked to relay that I think is really important, and that is a lot of particularly little birds migrate at night. The day's hotter, and bird heart rates get pumping really high and they get really hot, so they do most of their migrations at night, and that's why you'll wake up in the morning and see a lot more birds than you remember in the evening. A couple things that were said before that I just want to highlight. As when I work in the office, I can second that checklists are fantastic. Codes bog you down, and it's nice to hear kind of a layman's way of explaining what the codes actually say. So definitely make checklists for this. Proximity to special resources is also really important, like the Apple Park now. When you look at biodiversity in the urban framework, special resources are one of the 7 really, really important things to look at. In terms of some other things that have been brought up, I think that frequently architects are kind of at odds with AHJs because they don't like being told what to do and what they can't do. And so I think if you look at a lot of people, one of my favorite architects turned activists is Ed Masria. He says architects have failed. 40% of our emissions come from the built environment. If we take the next 50 years, half of those emissions are going to be embodied carbon. So I don't want to talk about dark skies because I think everybody said a lot of great things. I want to bring up these other things, like embodied carbon is going to be a huge component for us. I live in Redwood City. County's putting up a brand new zero net energy building, but the carbon return on that zero net energy building is over 150 years. So how long does the UN say we have in this climate crisis? We're in a new normal, and the kids are looking to you guys. I think also just one other thing, when I was studying environmental studies in college, a really big turning point for me was understanding that the built environment is not separate from the wild. The natural habitat and the built environment, they coexist together, and those are just some ideas I wanted to relay to you guys, so thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, Lisa Warren, followed by Jennifer Griffin, followed by Lisa Karpinski? Okay.
Hello again. So, again, thank you for having this discussion. I grew up in a place where you could see the stars every night, and I miss that. And I miss a lot of things. And 7 years ago, I tried to have Main Street not be able to have the residents have the blue glowing towers at the corners for all these reasons. Well, maybe I didn't know all the reasons then, but for many reasons. And no one seemed to care. And it's worrisome because I feel like when Eric was giving his presentation, it's like some of this stuff has been known forever and things shouldn't be allowed. But I'm talking about at the hotel at Main Street, they're elevator shafts is really what they are, at least one of them. And they're backlit, this glowing, awful blue that looks like a hospital emergency room or something. And it's completely unnecessary to read these bullet points. You want to preserve the ambience of night. That is not the ambience of night. And I know I'm zeroing in on one thing, but it's a really important one because that thing is as high as the hotel. It's unnecessary. It doesn't serve any purpose other than lighting up the hotel as a beacon and a not very attractive one. In fact, in my opinion, it's really tacky. So those kind of things, please, please, please do not somehow write in the ordinance that you can't do that. You just simply can't. Thankfully, I don't know, many of you probably don't know that the art at Main Street that's up high was going to be uplit with blue lights or green lights. Thankfully, that went away, and I'm hoping that if that ever comes back that they want to reintroduce lights like that, that given this conversation, it won't be allowed or allowed anywhere else. Like I say, a lot of these bullet points, they seem very obvious, but I don't see them in practice. And again, I think it's the architects, it's the designers. And, you know, there's a big issue when you're looking at a project, particularly a very large project, and you're seeing pictures of it during daylight hours, you're picturing it during daylight hours. There may be a twilight image of it, but it is no way realistic as to what it actually does to our environment when the lights are on nonstop. And I drove by, just one more thing, I drove by because I want to comment from hopefully these people or staff. I drove by Main Street on my way here, and they have, you know, the little party lights that everyone loves. People like that. I like that. But there's got to be a limit to how much of it you have, because there was actually a woman standing on the sidewalk, well, in the street, taking a picture of it, and I thought, dear God, she's standing in the street taking a picture of these lights, but there's too many. And I don't know, rooftop restaurants, bars that are being encouraged by some members of the community. I want to know if there's
Hey, Lisa, we're almost out of
input
time.
from our experts here as to how bad that is, because they're open 2 o'clock in the morning and you've got lights going straight up, no roof above them.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. Jennifer Griffin, followed by Lisa Karpinski. And let's note that Commissioner Takatashi is here as of 8:10.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I grew up in the Valley and had relatives in Santa Cruz Mountains. And when I was a little girl, I was lucky enough that my grandfather actually would point out the constellations to us. I don't know if a lot of people are able to have had someone like that did that, but it made a great difference to me growing up. And later, when they lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we saw Kohoutek go by. I mean, you saw satellites going by. It was clear. Scotts Valley was clear. You could see that. The first time I ever went to Death Valley, it was just mind-boggling. It is like you were in the middle of the Milky Way. And I think that children in the Valley need to make sure, in Silicon Valley, let's say Northern California, they need to be taught the constellations. They need to go out into areas where we spent a week when I was in 5th grade at Redwood Glen in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and we were up there. I mean, we all learned a lot of stuff about the wildlife, but you learned about the history of the constellations and different cultures, etc. So I think that that's very, very important. And the other thing I'm just going to mention is San Jose has a lovely park of about 100 acres that was donated by the Cottle family. It's an old working ranch. If you have not seen it, please drive by. It's at Branham and Snell. It is mind-boggling. There's an 1870 house. There's a working ranch from the 1800s, and it was given intact to the city of San Jose with the passing of the last person. I bless those people. What San Jose needs to make sure is that they don't have night sky blight around the edges. San Jose is pumping up the 20-story buildings, and you don't want to have that on the periphery of the Cottle Park land. Also, you don't want to have 30-story buildings by day, because that is will wreck you don't want to do that there. I don't know if anybody in San Jose is aware of that, but I drive by there all the time, and I'm like, oh my God, the blight. And at night, you want children to be able to drive by there and realize what it looked like 150, 250, 300 years ago. Look at that park. That is our future. I bless the Cottle family for having enough foresight to love the valley enough that they left that land to San Jose. It is up to San Jose not to wreck it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Lisa,
Yes,
welcome back.
hi. Yeah, so I'm really speaking as a resident of Sunnyvale. I also grew up seeing the stars and actually had a friend who worked at NASA who taught me the constellations, and we used to look at stars on a regular basis. I hike almost every day in the Rancho San Antonio area, and there have been nights where the sign from Santa Clara, it's probably the new arena or whatever it was so bright that it completely was disturbing when I was hiking, 5 miles away plus. And I mean, just in general, I've noticed the effects of light pollution driving up 101 and all of the signs near San Mateo that are moving digitally and very distracting as a driver, let alone the peace of mind of residents. I also have lights that I have to block out from my street, and I have to get like blackout curtains so I can actually not have that light penetrating. But just, I mean, to sort of emphasize what other folks have said, what Dashiell said about the impact of light on bird migration and foraging patterns, and just that it's not healthy for humans. And obviously, I'm glad that you're considering an ordinance and thinking about the issue, because I think it's really important. And I'm not an expert on the technicalities, but I've just had personal experience with the effects of light damage. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We don't have any more cards, so that concludes the public comment portion. Let's see if there's any comments from the commissioners.
I have a question about what we have in our municipal code for residential lighting regarding light trespass. And if you have homes which are very close together, some of that light trespass is, it wouldn't necessarily be coming from a security light fixture that might be pointed inappropriately, but it could be just because you have a window which is 5 feet from a property line and they've got bright lights inside. So I was wondering if that's handled at all.
Yeah, based off the research that we've done, we haven't really seen specifically internal single family, kind of that the windows, my interior lights are on and they're spilling over next door. I haven't seen that. We can definitely look into that and see what can be done. You do see, like you mentioned, a lot of the motion sensor lights, a lot of the timers, shielding, a lot of that is really geared towards the exterior of the building and making sure that that light trespass that you referenced isn't happening, or if it does happen, it's very limited and very focused on a particular use. So like something like your backyard gate, is there a light there? That's very focused and it's not illuminating everything. That's really where it gets to.
Is it actually in the code that for residential to not, like direct?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I was just speaking generally dark sky policies. In our current ordinance, no, we don't have anything like that. The Hillside does get into it a little bit, but not like our R1, R2, R3. It doesn't go into that detail.
Okay, so that is something that we could consider?
Yes.
So that there is a way to actually enforce the shielding of the lights, so you're not staring up at, because people are switching to the LED lights, and some of those are really high powered, and they basically burn your retina when you look at them.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's definitely something we can have. Other cities have done that. There was a slide I have that have those examples. Some cities have specific, like, we want these lights. Porch lights are only so tall, things like that. It's definitely things that we can adopt and kind of ensure that there's spillage or preventage of spillage into adjacent properties.
Since some of the speakers have mentioned this. So I grew up in Vermont, and I was on a rural road until I was about 11. And there at night, when there was no moon, especially with the tree canopy, you could not see your hand waving in front of your face. It was that dark, and of course you could see the stars and the aurora borealis. And so here, it's quite a different environment, and it, you know, it makes me sad to hear people that, you know, grew up here and that did see the stars when they were younger, and that they're not able to do that now. So I think that, you know, not just for the birds, but for the people living here, that this is important to address. I'm looking at the matrix that we have from the neighboring cities. I'm not entirely sure, you know, where we're going to, you know, go from here. The best one in the matrix I'm seeing is what was being done in Malibu. So if I were to make some recommendations, it would be to look, you know, more closely at what Malibu's doing, and then see if there are some other cities that have policies. And again, it gets into, you know, are we going to be saying encourage, or are we going to be making requirements? And with regards with the light trespass, I would want that to be a requirement. Now we do have, and I brought this up earlier, we do have the 7 towers that are allegedly coming in, and my question is there some way to mitigate the effects of that? And again, with the pedestrian overpass, because here it's not, you know, that they would be having, you know, spotlights shining down on the residents. It's just that you're going to have a tower that will have rooms inside that are lit. And is there something that can be done about that? Because you've got, you know, single-family residential all around that would be looking at it.
Definitely. Yeah, and kind of to your point about Malibu, Malibu did something I thought that was unique. Well, generally was unique, was that they had a tiered approach. They were one of the cities that were like single family first, and then multifamily, and then industrial. So I think that's something we can definitely look into, the possibility of, I know you're saying, how do we get the other non-actors? One thing we do, well, I would like to get direction on, is applicability. Is this something that is happening to everybody right now, or are we doing, as you come in to get a new permit, you update your lights, or do we allow the nonconformity to continue forever, that kind of thing? Because there is a difference in that. Different cities have done different things. So yeah, if you guys could speak to that, I think that would be helpful for staff.
I would suggest that. I think a lot of people are aware of this issue, so I think it's good to start pumping up the awareness so people understand what it is before they take a voluntary choice, take a phased-in mandatory choice, and take something that is much more mandatory. So I think it's going to be important to have that level of education out there. I think the presentations you have today, if you splice the videos and make them available on the website, I think it'll save some time.
I agree. In the bird presentation and looking online, they had sections where they would say, you know, why is this important? And the speakers have really added a lot to this, you know, with regards to your circadian rhythm and potential health effects for people, and then also with the migrating birds and then the local birds. If there's some, you know, presentation to the community really detailing the why part, I think that would help to get more interest. And if we could have people voluntarily making changes, that, you know, that's great. And then as these new codes are brought in line, so that, you know, you mentioned the 3 different, you know, commercial, residential, industrial. To me, I would have all 3 go, not, you know, let's just focus on residential. I would say, you know, everybody's going to put in their part to help.
All right, any other comments? Do you guys have enough direction to start?
Do you have any comments about any lighting requiring a hearing? So we did see, like I had mentioned, single-family homes sometimes have landscaping lighting, and sometimes that'll require a hearing or staff approval, things that want an exception a difference from the lighting standard, maybe uplighting for a particular type of use. Is that something you guys would want, or just straight prohibited light, certain types of lighting, anything like that?
I'm trying to think about applicability and size of project as one of the criteria.
Okay.
So as one way. I'm not trying to differentiate between residential or retail or commercial, but I do believe that in some retail applications there might be some other rules in terms of timing during the day, because some retail applications do need the signage for the lighting, and I think the business community would be a little bit concerned about that. So I think we probably do want to get their input and find a good balance as well. Like there's not to narc on them, but maybe I am narking on them. If you drive up Stevens Creek and you look at Tantau, there's this hot pot place, and I have no idea why that sign is like flickering all the time. Like I don't know if it was like by design, it's like a really cool way to attract people, but we got one of those going on. So you know, I don't know if that was the intent of the signage, but something is either broken or I don't think it's malicious. I just think something might be broken. So something like that.
Is the thinking for a hearing on residential outdoor landscape lighting that every single application would require a hearing?
It could be thresholds.
So if somebody went to Home Depot and bought a solar path light, you would require a hearing to accept that?
Yeah, well,
right. So that seems highly restrictive,
right,
and really over the top from the standpoint of regulation. And I seriously doubt there would be a lot of enforcement. I mean, I can't see a neighbor saying he's got a path light, I'm gonna call code enforcement and force a hearing. but I get, you know, if they're at war with each other, maybe sure. But as I look through the matrix, right, it's interesting to note that almost all of the valley cities, including Palo Alto, don't really have highly restricted policies. So we would be setting precedents, I guess, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just wondering if we could learn from those other cities why they don't have an ordinance, just because generally speaking it is something people are generally concerned about, and are there other issues and or unintended consequences that we could learn from why especially Palo Alto, given generally, if something can be regulated, it would probably be there. So.
Well, there's also, I mean, I would also add we might be first, right? There might be a case where we're going first, so that may be part of it. I do have a question about and other exceptions, which I don't see here, is really for security, for like security kind of motion sensors for people. So might want to look into that as well. So that's a common concern I hear.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of looking into Malibu's ordinance is that they did work with the sheriff. To kind of get their input on the ordinance to make sure security concerns are being addressed adequately, so that there's nothing precluding a secure home.
I think, Shani, were you trying to answer a question for Commissioner Takahashi? Oh, you live in Palo Alto. Okay, come on up, please.
So I think the issue has not come up in Palo Alto because nobody has mentioned it. I've been there, resident there for over 20 years. The issue never came up, so that's probably why Palo Alto has not discussed that.
Well, there could be a chance we could go first.
Yeah, we're going to beat them once.
We're going to beat them once? I think there's a little rivalry there, but there's leadership, but there's no rivalry here, so I'll leave it at that. All right, well, thank you for that comment. Okay, anything else on our end?
Well, I was just in Vermont last week, and they have adopted some kind of a dark sky policy in the Burlington area, and I just pulled up from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, which I worked at a million years ago, but they have an outdoor lighting manual for Vermont municipalities. It's actually quite noticeable when you fly in to the Burlington area how much darker it is now than it used to be.
It's dark.
It's pretty amazing. When you talk about security, one of the issues that I have is that we have street lights in the neighborhoods, and they're not necessarily located at an intersection where you have people crossing the street in the dark, and it's poorly lit. And from my standpoint, I would much rather see the light that's out on the street in front of my house gone, and the intersection where I have pedestrians in the dark walking in dark clothing at night have some sort of low-level lighting on the crosswalk, that shows me that there's a person there. To me, that would be a lot more helpful, because I have some, security lighting around, not bright, but, just normal porch type lighting. So I was wondering if there is some sort of, invention or something that other cities are using, which provides just enough light that you're not, blinded by it when you get to the intersection, but you can see the pedestrians, crossing. Because we have a lot of kids that, they have things to go to. There's band that has practice at the high school. It goes pretty late, and they've got to get home. So if there was something to help with that type of security, and I think that when you get into the notion of the hearings, you would have to, in my understanding, you would have to have something codified to make this hearing be required. So we would have had to have created some pretty strict municipal code to get to that point. And I don't feel the will here with the landscape lighting in particular. However, it seems as though what we're trying to do is dim the city overall. You make it all not so bright. So if you have some suggestions on how to get to that objective, and
maybe a lumen threshold might help.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but it's the balance with visibility and safety, right? Yeah. And so that's definitely not easy to do. I mean, because at my office, we had an armed robbery in the parking lot late at night, and it's in San Jose, and we had the yellow lighting.
Sodium.
Right, which is very dim, and all of the employees were concerned about the lack of visibility. Right, so we essentially worked with the city to reassess how much lumens, how much intensity we could have in the parking lot because of personal safety issues, real live personal safety issues. So that's where if we dim things too much, then that could be a ramification of certain areas will need either exceptions or something along those lines.
And time frames as well.
Right.
Well, I kind of question that. So I did go to the Bay Club when it was at the Valco site, and it was pretty well lit in the parking lot, and we were still having cars robbed in the evenings, broken into. They just smash and grab, and it got to the point where they needed to put a security guard standing there watching the parking lot at night. So I'd like to hear the statistics about the lighting in the parking areas and the smash and grabs, to see, is there really a correlation? Is it really that much safer at night if it's highly lit? And then do you have to get to a really high level of lighting in order to in order for it to make a difference?
All right, I think we closed out this issue. Hopefully you guys have enough input there. Look forward to getting to your ordinances. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come back. We'll be talking about the study session on the general plan annual review and talking through some of the methodologies around that. So please come back at 8:45. For those following on TV, come back in 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
All right, welcome back to the Planning Commission meeting. We're on item number 4. It's October 28th, and we're going to be talking about a study session on the GPA, which is the General Plan Annual Review Implementation Plan. And we're going to provide additional direction to staff on the format and content of the General Plan Annual Review Implementation Plan. And I think we're going to break this up over the next 4 months to go through chunks of it as we need to meet our April requirement for City Council.
First of all, I believe you have an announcement to make regarding Vice Chair Saxena having to leave.
I do. Thank you very much. So yes, Vice Chair Saxena is heading back. He's left, but Commissioner Takahashi has joined us. So
we have a quorum.
So we do have quorum.
So the next study session item, like you said, Chair Wong, is the General Plan Annual Review Implementation Plan. We heard from you last time about the formatting and the readability of the document that we've been using for some years now. So this is our first attempt out of 4, maybe 5, coming to you. This first one is to get more direction, clarification on how it reads, it's easy to digest, what other improvements or changes that you wish to see happen so that we can make that modification and coming back to you next time. We're hoping that we can then go over some of the details and some of the sections and improve on the checklist. With that, I have Pew Ghosh, our planning manager, to present you a brief presentation, then we can start a discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Pew.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commission. Once again, I'm here to talk about the General Plan Annual Report. At the last meeting, we had a request to kind of talk about our community form diagram and to kind of go over very briefly how it pertains to properties within Cupertino, and we're kind of addressing that with this since it does pertain to the general plan. Our city is divided into several special areas and neighborhoods, and in an attempt to identify big picture standards for each of those special areas, we have the community form diagram. What the community form diagram identifies in, again, very broad areas, what the densities are, and then what heights that different properties could develop up to within those planning areas. Of course, in addition, we do have our zoning standards that also dictate other things with regard to setbacks and other specific objective things that you have to meet in order for development to be approved. One of the interesting things we have in our community form diagram is also a slope line requirement that only applies to what is identified in the dark blue lines here. So the slope line applies to these areas within the city, which are our main thoroughfares, where most of our city's, the largest thoroughfares that we have, where most of the traffic kind of goes through. And that is identified in footnotes at the bottom over here, and they go through to there. And the special areas are identified by color, and they each have their own little box that kind of identifies the densities and heights for each of those special areas. And the neighborhoods are kind of all encompassed within one box at the bottom of that community form diagram. Within each special area, there are what we call gateways or nodes where additional planning could occur, or certain different standards could be identified than what the entire special area has. So, for example, the Homestead special area talks about, in general, it talks about a 35 dwelling units per acre per the land use map, and then it talks about, it identifies that for what is a little commercial area at the southeast corner of Blaney and Homestead, there's a little shopping center there which can develop up to 15 dwelling units per acre, so it carves that out. It also talks about maximum heights being 30 feet or 45 feet, and it kind of identifies where those are. However, we also have the Stelling Gateway and the North De Anza Gateway, which are both part of the Homestead special area. There are certain different standards or more specific standards that are identified within each of those boxes. Similarly, Heart of the City has different gateways, nodes, and then we also have the South Valco Park, which is part of the Heart of the City special area, as is the city center node. So that's really how the community form diagram is broken down. So each of these are the special areas that are identified here on the right-hand side of the map. Sure.
May I ask a question, or I'm afraid that if we move far from this map that I'm going to forget.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm happy to.
Well, we had a discussion among the planning commissioners a few months back, and we had wanted to include major collectors in the with the one-to-one setback requirement. And do you recall
Yeah.
this? Okay, so that was one item which has kind of fallen through the cracks, and I would like to see it brought back. And I do notice that this is a revised figure LU2. So I went online to look at the general plan, and I see that it's been updated.
Mm-hmm.
So all these are the things from September?
Correct.
The changes, okay, so, and then it looks like the entire general plan got updated, so that you had like the main body, the 500 and so pages, and then it looked like all the links were also updated. Is that correct? So they had it, it says for the following links are for your reference only, something like that, and then it's got all the chapters done separately, and then the appendices done separately below. Was that all updated too?
No, so the only thing that was updated was Appendix A. It's the digital version, if you kind of look to, because we'd created a new land use designation, so the only one that was changed was Appendix A. All the other versions are the same. It's just that we have the entire general plan as one link, and we wanted to be able to provide the chapters as different links as a convenience.
Okay, so if I look at, I happened to look at Appendix A, so I saw that it was updated. So I did not look at each of the other ones. So if I'm in the, for instance, the allocation table, in the large body, okay, that one was changed. If I go and click on, I think it's the land use element, will I not see that change?
It should be updated. The Chapter 3, the only chapters that were amended in September were Chapter 3 and Appendix A.
Oh, okay, great, all right. And
And,
then
I believe Chapter 2 as well.
Chapter 2, yes.
Okay, so I'll see
Updated.
LU4 in the separate link.
It
too.
should be there.
Okay, great. No, that's good. I just don't want to. I don't want to grab from the wrong thing, and have it not be correct. What
Certainly,
I'm looking
and
at.
we'll make sure just to double check. It's always a good reminder to double check.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on from the community form diagram, just a reminder, we do our general plan annual report every year. It's required by state law to kind of use to monitor progress and implementation of action items within the general plan, and also to identify work program items and to help with budgeting, both time, money, and resources. And then also a reminder that the housing element annual report is required to be turned in on forms that are published by HCD, also by April 1st. We had a PC study session last month, I believe, and at maybe the end of September, and there was certain direction from Planning Commission, which included providing the Commission with links to annual reports for the cities of Mountain View and Palo Alto, which were provided in the staff report, and also to present the policies and strategies in an Excel spreadsheet with a narrative. And we kind of attempted to do that with the attachments that were sent with the staff report. There are some draft narratives. We kind of reorganized the policies and strategies to just be in a pure tabular format, and added very brief narrative descriptions for each of the policies and strategies. And we're still going through that effort of actually updating and getting input from all the other departments and divisions on the policies and strategies. Kept my presentation short, so happy to take in comments and suggestions.
Well, good. Commissioner Moore?
Could we look at policy LU 19.1? And at this point, that's the only one that I will dig into the weeds on. I just wanted to have it clarified.
Do you have a question as well on the comment on the dating of that as well? So we're looking at
yes, yeah. It says 2018, and it has some residential units, a quantity mentioned.
If you go to page 27 of the Excel PDF, all of LU 19, I believe has. I don't know if that's the right date and the right number of units. Just wanted to make sure that was correct, but I think that's something that be adjusted later.
So what it is, in the comments, it says that the policy, it's actually 19.3. Policy edited in September of 2018, and I think it should be 19. And it says the city manager authorized to negotiate an alternative development program for the site, this is the Valco site, with up to a maximum of 1,500 residential units, including all density bonuses. Is that correct?
That was our understanding, and having listened to the minutes from, or seen the minutes from that city council meeting. But we're happy to take input on that too, if anybody finds anything different.
Okay, so my question is, the general plan from 2014 had an EIR which studied 800 residential units at Valco, and this is 1,500. So I'm wondering how, and I think that this is a great topic to bring to the Environmental Review Committee, is for educational reasons, is how is that, the 1,500 residential units, how will that tier off of the previously done EIR? And we did have some attorneys do a presentation at the ERC, and if we, maybe there's some way that that can happen again, where the tiering can be explained to us, just for our own edification.
So the general plan EIR actually looked at an increase of up to 2,500 residential units. It kind of looked at growth beyond what is in the general plan. So it covered additional, the program that was studied in the general plan was larger than what the general plan itself allows. And so as a result, there could be some additional studies done that would support the whatever program that comes out of any negotiations or any public process related to this site, and be encompassed in some sort of environmental documents. But that's something that we still have to look at and analyze and determine what needs to be done to accommodate that.
I'd like to make a suggestion that when we look at LU 19.1 through LU 19.311, 3.11, that we just validate that's the City Council's intent, and that's the right number. And it's updated for, is it 2018 you're looking at, or 2019?
It should be 2019. That's
okay,
a
cool. I just want to make sure it's, one, it should be 2019, and two, that we have the right number, what City Council's intent was as well.
Sure.
Let's just make sure that's there. I was just going to say I like the new format. I think that helps. I think for our purposes for planning, it'd be good if we could get the Excel sheet so we can slice, dice, organize, create categories so that we can think through it on our own. I don't know if that's okay.
It is part of the packet.
Oh, no, it's a PDF version of the Excel.
There's two versions in there. There's a PDF version and an Excel version. I think you may download the Excel version.
I'll double check. Oh, cool. All right, I got 2 Excel PDFs. Oh. Maybe I did something wrong. Thank you.
If not, we'll make sure you get the Excel.
I'll get the right one.
Not a problem. We'll check
I'll look
too.
for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think that helps for planning.
Okay, so when I go into the municipal code, there is a section, chapter 2.32.080, procedural rules, and it says the Planning Commission may adopt from time to time such rules of procedure as it may deem necessary to properly exercise its powers and duties. Such rules shall be subject to approval by the council before becoming effective. All such rules shall be kept on file with the chairperson, etc. I bring this up because it doesn't seem like this type of review has been done before, and we're talking about the process for reviewing the general plan. And some of the things which we might want to adopt for a process could be that we would be taking 4 to 7, having 4 to 7 study sessions. We would begin in September and be completed by January 15th of the following year for council review, and that it would be a review of the general plan per California Government Code 65400, which you bring up at the beginning, and then that in turn has its own set of requirements which we would need to meet from 65400. So it would be my preference that we were creating a set of procedural rules that could be followed next year, and that it doesn't look like it has to be codified, but it would be something that we would reference as we continue to do this in the future years. And that's one part. The other part that is a little confusing is that we're looking at objective standards at this kind of at the same time, and the objective standards seem to be coming back to us sort of alternately. So it's kind of hitting the general plan like a couple different ways. It's I'm going to suspect that the objective standards issue, that this is just a 2019 issue, and that we're not going to be doing this 2020. Mm-hmm. Does that sound about right?
That sounds correct. The objective standards issue is something that the council suggested the Planning Commission could look at to see whether there are some policies and strategies that might need further clarification, or that could be addressed in other portions of the municipal code, or to further clarify or support those policies. And that's really part of it.
I think it'll be important for staff, and I mean, we can do our homework as well, but to find the harmonization between the municipal code, the objective standards, and the general plan. So I think there's still some inconsistencies there, but wherever we can actually harmonize that way we can reduce some of the confusion and make sure things are clarified. So that'd be my only other direction.
So we have like level 2 requests that we made of city council. So those are things. So I'm actually going to
1.5, if I remember.
Yeah, we had 1, 1.5, and 2, and so we do have things that might still be going on next year. So I might want to take that back, that this is a 2019 problem. This might continue on.
Right. What would come off of the tier 2 would be work program items that we would kind of build into our work program. For example, dark sky policies, it's kind of built into our work program, but that might be a phase 2 item. Not that it is, but something similar like a solar roof policy or anything else that is suggested in the phase 2 items that could be built into the council's work program and be brought back as separate projects, not necessarily all together at once.
I think the next, if we have some agreement that we are willing to put together a procedural pamphlet or something of some sort, Even if it's just like one page that says we're going to be taking this many months to, like I had outlined, that we're going to have 4 to 7 study sessions. We start in September, we're done January 15th. And that way you've got enough time to get it to City Council so that they can review it and meet the April 1st deadline. Even if it's just, 3 bullet points, just even at the start, and as time goes on, we're like, well, we need to add more to it. Let's do that. Is there some agreement to put together something like that?
Yeah, I think it'll be important to look at prioritization as well. So.
Can I clarify one thing? So the work that we're doing now on the general plan annual review is typically work that is done on reviewing implementation of the existing general plan, not looking at the policies to change them and modify them. And so I just want to make sure that when we're talking about perhaps allocating 4 to 7 sessions per year under this section, to make sure we're not talking at cross purposes. So there's, as you said, there's the work on looking at objective standards, making modifications to the actual policies in the general plan. And then there's the separate work of making sure that the city is on track to implement policies that already exist. And so when we're talking about creating work plans for many years moving forward, I want to make sure that we're talking about, we're looking at the right thing.
So Sarah, please introduce yourself since you just
sorry.
joined us as well. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Clark, I'm Deputy City Attorney.
So welcome. So related to that, so is there a different policy vehicle for us to do that, or a different kind of session? So you're saying we're trying to combine 2 things at once?
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah. So. It's certainly possible.
One's looking forward. I mean, the things that have been discussed have been looking forward versus accomplishments to date relative to the existing plan, and not necessarily recommending changes to the existing
plan. This current work stream is basically a review of what has occurred to date.
Right.
And what is the correct vehicle for us to actually review the general plan going forward as well?
Sure.
I think that's what you're requesting for Commissioner Moore, for study sessions on both, I think, actually.
No.
Okay.
So I have it separate.
Okay.
So for me, this 4 to 7 sessions is because we've got, 90 some odd pages here. And it looks as though we would be reading through, on our own time, reading through the comments and getting some sense for, what the progress is like. So, I have to say, when it's hard for me to determine,
Right, but your comments about objective standards and that, wasn't that more of a forward element in terms of?
Yeah, how does that, it's like
Right.
we're hitting, I want to know, it's like, are we going to be doing that, is that going to be an every year thing now, or is that just because of the situation we found ourselves in 2019, that project ended up being taken care of. So this is separate, but I with 65400, I'm kind of curious what it is specifically that we need to meet in that requirement. And I do understand that we can't be changing the objective standards that we're trying to determine how far along we've gotten in meeting at the same time. That obviously doesn't work. And it is kind of interesting because next year we're going to be looking at this list, and some of these things are going to be different. Yeah, so come next September. So to me, the 4 to 7 sessions has to do only with the length of of this document.
Sure, and I just want to answer a question that you raised a little bit earlier about what the proper vehicle is for the more forward-looking review of the general plan, and generally that's developed through a work plan. And so understanding what directives come from City Council in terms of which aspects of the general plan you're looking at. State law requires that you only update your general plan a limited number of times per year, and so it can't be something that we're doing every session, 4 times, yeah. And so that's up to city staff and council directive to understand when that's coming. I know we have directive on looking at objective standards right now, but I just want to keep us in 2 separate lanes here between reviewing what we already have and implementation with that and looking at these policies. And I know we're sort of combining them a bit here, so.
I'd like to propose that we do spend some time on this. There are 92 pages here, and I think we might need to do this over 4 to 6 sessions. I think that's going to be important. I hope other commissioners agree with that as we just review that progress. Some might be quicker because there are things that say not an action item, so that might have been reviewed. So, but we're going to need to allocate some time.
I would recommend that we don't start
So
this
is the
tonight,
purpose
though.
to
No, we don't start this
to
tonight. but,
go through the plan line by line and assess where we're at, or is it more the process and implementing the process by which we're doing the review?
I think tonight was really talking about the formatting that came
Right.
back with good. Can
Right.
we work with that? And two, what kind of process we'd like to go forward with for tonight only. So.
Right.
One of the things that I would appreciate comment on is, the comments. Like I said, these were like draft narratives that we were expecting to put in. We've identified what is an action item, what is an action item, but no action has been taken on it so far. So are those things that, Planning Commission thinks should be converted into a work program item and, for next year's work program, for example. Like I said, there is, if there are policies in here which, you believe do deserve some objectivity and need tightening up, the avenue that I would suggest is not to make that through a general plan amendment within the general plan, because the general plan is supposed to be general, but possibly, be in some sort of a municipal code or some sort of a different policy document or a guideline that is adopted by the city council. So that objectivity lies in that document, not necessarily in the general plan, but is applicable, that somehow implements that particular policy or that particular direction that is already in the general plan.
I think when we go through the process, one way may be to, as we go through each one of these areas, as we review them, we'll be able to have action items from there or things that we follow up with in the future for issues, like open issues that we can actually look at. And then as we capture those, then we can figure out which ones make sense. I think if you take a first cut on the areas that are not an action item, it may turn out we only have looks like about 20 pages of things that actually have an action item for review. Mm-hmm. If we start with those and then figure out if there are items that are not an action item that commissioners may be interested in, that might give you a list that might end up to be 40 pages instead of 92.
Right. So right now, there is a narrative, I believe, on most everything except a few of the, you know what? No. I have a version that I'm working on right now that has more information. But when we present that, this gives you a sense of what we're trying to portray as, this is not an action item, this is, implemented through something else, or this is an action item but nothing has occurred because it hasn't been on a work program. So we'll get that, we'll probably finish up by the time we come back next time, and we'll present that to you, and that we can certainly.
Oh, so this is a working document, it's not the complete one.
Correct.
So
These
some
are
of the
just draft. Yeah, we
got it.
just
Some of the
started
not in
putting
action items will have
thoughts
action items.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
We just started to populate that.
So to me, format looks good. I think we can work with this. I think that once we figure out how we capture the open issues and go through a process, then that should help.
Yep.
I was wondering, format-wise, it reads very well. I have a little difficulty wanting to look at some special areas because our request was to get the strategies and policies listed, and what we ended up losing in that were goals. I think maybe it was the goals, but so for instance, if you had Heart of the City as a heading, because it wasn't a strategy or a policy, then when I was going through the list, I had to dig into the text of the sentence in order to find the heading. So I was wondering if headings could be reintroduced for some of the major development areas.
Just as clarification, the first column in here is the heading it's the topic, is the heading for each goal in essence.
Right,
So for Heart of the City, there are how many ever 5 or 6 or how many ever policies there are. That's in the table. So if you were to, in the Excel spreadsheet, if you were on table LU, you can actually filter it out by Heart of the City, so that you can pull up just those ones.
I don't have that. You don't have it either.
I just have PDFs.
So just for clarity, you did include the links to the Palo Alto and Mountain View.
It's in the
right?
staff report.
Yes, but their formats are somewhat different.
Yes.
Right, where they talk about accomplishments, and that doesn't seem to be in our table at all in terms of what's been accomplished, I guess, over the last year. Is that something we want to capture, or?
So for, certainly, we have our, part of this is that our general plan, for example, and as an example, says that the city will adopt a climate action plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have a climate action plan, and that will be captured in this document. But as far as accomplishments go, there are in addition policies and strategies in the climate action plan that actually implement the climate action plan. And those accomplishments are kind of captured in the annual reporting for the climate action plan. And so it does not necessarily that is reflected in the in this particular document.
So it makes it hard to unravel because you're nesting those things, right?
Right.
So I question whether or not, from a standpoint of a document where you can
Mm-hmm.
go through and assess, here was our general plan, and this is how we did this year with regard to following that general plan and the accomplishments to that I don't feel that in the format that we have, that's all, in terms of what have we, what's under, like with the Palo Alto, what's underway, they also state what's not completed, right? So it's very much more specific to what have we done versus the plan versus more general, a general table of discussion is what I see in terms of what's in front of us right now.
So as far as work program items go, if there are work program items that kind of stem from the general plan, we will list that as an accomplishment.
Okay.
A lot of the work program items have not been stemmed from the general plan. And to that end, they're not reflected here. It's not as though there haven't been things that we have, that there aren't things that we have not worked on. There are projects that have gone forward. There have been municipal code amendments. There have been general plan amendments. There have been all kinds of things that have happened as projects go, but they don't necessarily stem from the policies and strategies that are within the general plan, and that's why they're not listed here.
Okay.
To the extent that they would have been listed in here. But there, in some of the comments, you will find that it says this is an action for which no action has been taken on this action item, and that's as I'm going through, we're identifying those.
Right.
And so
Which it's unfortunate because the way it reads, it's almost like there's no action on.
Right,
those.
and so
Right.
what we can do is we can sort it so that you have the action items at the top. The sad part will then be it's not numerical. It's not alphanumerical.
Right.
But since you do have the Excel spreadsheet, you can filter those out. So that you can look at the ones that are action items.
Yeah, I mean the clever part about the Palo Alto format, right, is the status is either ongoing, which there are definitely ongoing elements, and then completed, which they've highlighted green. This is an accomplishment that is consistent with what we've planned, and then what's underway, and then what's not completed, which in this case is highlighted green as well. It seems like that should be yellow or red, but anyway, just an observation.
Yeah, we're happy to color code this any way that the commission would like. We're just trying to keep it simple.
And manageable. Right.
So just for clarification purposes, is the assumption at this moment that a lot of these just so we're on the same page on a baseline, is it when something says not an action item at this moment, there may be stuff to add here. This is just kind of a draft format that you're sending to us. So a lot of those not an action items might actually have actions. Okay. And back to Commissioner Takahashi's point about where we are in terms of progress. There is a way to then describe more, which currently is in the comments section, but I think you're looking for more clarification as to completion rate or what was accomplished.
Right, because I think that's an important element is and if it's just reserved to this very small, narrow comments column at the far.
So you want a status indicator that says started or in progress.
Right, or completed. This is
or completed.
This is what was done. Yeah.
Okay.
That's consistent with those elements.
When you look at the Palo Alto implementation status matrix that they put together, do you prefer that format?
Well, it's actually, there are some sections that, this looks pretty interesting, and then there's some sections of just these massive Excel spreadsheets that you have to really sort through, and so just from some elements, yes.
Okay.
But what struck me just was for housing. These are the things that are in, this is what we did, this is what's in progress, these are ongoing, and this is what we haven't even started yet, right?
Okay.
And whether or not, I guess, how they've tied that back to the general plan in terms of those specific elements, I think is, I haven't quite figured out yet either, so.
And related to those assumptions, it sounds like we've had a lot of work that was done outside of the normal general plan that has come through work programs that don't necessarily tie back to the general plan, which is why we're seeing a gap of some accomplishments as well, which is a larger strategic question as to why we're not in alignment to the general plan, but that's a different question for another point, which is another work stream. I understand that. I just want to make sure that's clear in the baseline of assumptions. Is one, this table isn't completed yet. This is just a format for us to look at. Two, there's a request to actually improve our status of where we are with the items that we have. And three, this is a regulatory document that we're just reviewing so that it gets approved and sent, but it doesn't capture all the accomplishments of what we've done this year.
So the general plan annual report doesn't necessarily have to be submitted anywhere. This is just for the city council. The HCD forms have to be submitted.
Those forms do, yes.
Yes,
Yeah, those are
these do
required.
not have to be submitted anywhere.
I actually like that the Palo Alto report includes their HCD report, and you know, yes, they are big tables, but I would actually prefer that we included that as well, because that's when we're looking at Government Code 65400, that's saying that we need to have the HCD report. And I was looking to see if they had something really specific about what needs to be done about the general plan, but all I'm seeing is that they say, investigate and make recommendations to the legislative body regarding reasonable and practical means for implementing the general plan or element of the general plan so that it will serve as an effective guide for orderly growth and development, preservation and conservation of open space land and natural resources, and the efficient expenditure of public funds relating to the subjects addressed in the general plan. So they're really not providing any concrete guide. And you know, looking at the Palo Alto program implementation status chart, I think we maybe want to pull this up and see if there's anything in here that we think is missing in what we're doing, and you know, maybe we want to add a column. You know, does someone have the ability to share that? It's I'm looking at PDF 15 from the Palo Alto link provided in the agenda.
Pulling that up now.
I think the two columns that are missing when you look at a macro level is time frame and status. I think that's really the two things you could add that would just solve this problem to save you some time. Do you feel the same way, Commissioner Takahashi?
Yeah, definitely a status of...
Status and time frame.
I think we can probably reformat comments and have that to be reflected as status.
And time frame.
Yeah,
save you some
time frame.
time.
We'll figure that out.
That's your superset. I mean, I'm assuming there's like a superset that includes the HCD requirement, the GPA, and then the non-GPA stuff, and then you can just slice and dice and be done once and done and not have to build 5 of these. So hopefully that'll save you some time. And then we can just sort against that. Any other comments from before we open up to public comment? We got cards, yes we did. So, all right, let me open up and then you can jump in later. All right. All right, we've got Jennifer Griffin and Peggy Griffin. Please come up. For those following on TV, you get 3 minutes. You submit a blue card and you can talk to us and talk about any of these items. So please come to meeting.
The Griffins are coming out of Ireland. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I grew up in the area and now am lucky to call Cupertino home, and we were actually in the county before 2000, so we're now in Cupertino officially, though you can go in and out of it very easily. I will just tell you that I was sitting there thinking about you all talking about the discussion of the general plan, and we annexed in 2000, and the first time we ran into the general plan was 2005, and I sat in the old, I think it was this chambers, and went through, there was a whole discussion of it. And I realized that the general plan is kind of like our working constitution. It's a collection of documents and appendix and links and go here, go there, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it is good that you all are taking time to study it, look at where it's going, what it's doing, are we on track, etc. I will tell you personally that in the last 3 to 4 years, there have been things that have happened in the state, in Sacramento, that have caused me to question what my place is in the state, what my place is in my city, what are my rights in my city, what are my rights in the state, who is making decisions over my property, over what I am doing, what my city's doing. And I'm scared. I have never seen anything like this happen. And our general plan is our general plan. It is not San Francisco's, it is not Oakland's, it's not Sacramento's, it's not LA's, it's not the ghost town of Shiloh, or what if there is one. It's ours. It's Cupertino's that was crafted on the unique history of the city. It came out of orchards. It came out of San Jose and Sunnyvale are going to annex our whole area. We need to form a city, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I think happened in 1952. And therefore, we need to protect our Constitution, our city, what makes our city unique. And I will think that there are people, and I'm talking about the SB 35 people, the SB 50 people, and the ADU people. They scare the heck out of me. I don't know what they're planning on doing to take over my city, but I want to live in my city. I have the right to say how I want my city to be, not someone else in Sacramento, me here in my city. So therefore, I will say, again, I want buildings that are workable. I don't want 200-foot-high buildings. Regardless of what SB 35 says, not everybody agrees with it or how it was implemented. We have the CASA Compact Group, which
we're 15 seconds in. The timer's
intent
broken, so just so you know.
Of upzoning the entire state. And a lot of people don't agree with their methods. Many people in that group are not appointed, they were not elected, and they sure as heck don't represent me or my city. So there's a lot of explaining we need to do. And I say, I want buildings that are no more than 35 foot high, protect heart of the city, and make sure that Cupertino looked like it did 4 years ago. And believe me, if SB 50 is signed in January, we have got to fight the heck for our state. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot. Just for those coming up here, Peggy Griffin, the timer have a little malfunction, so we're manually timing, just so you know. So I'll give you a 15-second warning, so welcome.
Commissioners, staff, a couple suggestions. Page numbers, I know that you can refer by strategy and policy, but a page number would be good for reference. I like the idea of adding time frame, possibly supporting departments, partners doesn't give me a lot of information because the responsible department, it ends up there. Maybe you could combine the columns and add time frame. I like the green for completed. It kind of makes me feel good every time I see a green. And on Valco, if you look at the page that has strategy LU 19.3.6, for example, building form, it says buildings should have high quality architecture and an emphasis on aesthetics, human scale, blah, blah, blah. Taller buildings should provide appropriate transitions to fit into their surrounding area. I don't see that that's negotiable. So some of these items, the housing, the size and everything, but not all of these should have the same comment put to them, I think. Unless all these items, strategies are negotiable. But some of these are qualities that no matter what kind of plan is negotiated, we still want that. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, we have no more comments here. We'll move back to the commissioners, see if there's any other comments here from us. And staff, are we giving you the right direction or inputs that you need? Okay. Are we just afraid to go home early? Is that the issue? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No, I think you guys provided really good direction, which is exactly what we wanted to receive tonight, so we can come back to you next time with an even cleaner version. But I see Commissioner Moore perhaps have one more comment for us.
One more thing.
Yeah, okay, I just want to see that the status column that they have in the Palo Alto matrix is going to somehow be added into our, maybe it's the comment section that we have. Is that where it's going to go?
I mean, just off the top of my head right now, I'm thinking that those two are very similar. We can probably do something about that, because as you see the formatting, we're trying to jam as many columns in as possible, so perhaps we can merge them into one.
I think the suggestion was look at status and time frame and
Exactly.
get rid
Yep.
of comments.
Yes.
Is that
Yep.
is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you're thinking, Commissioner
Yeah.
Takahashi? Okay.
Just to confirm, so no comments, but add status and time frame.
But that's something
I
we
actually-
can
I like
discuss.
all of
And
You like all of them? You want
Like
want
all
two
of
more?
it.
All right.
You can go wider.
yeah.
You can go
So
wider.
You're still going to need notes and comments.
Yeah, we'll
It's
take a look at
probably-
that. You know, I'm sure we can find a
Some
way
of
to
the
accommodate.
some of the comments today are really status indicators, and they're blended with. There's no time frames, but some of them are blended with status indicators. So you can put more in the notes, I guess.
Maybe we take out funding source.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, only because I'm looking at the Palo Alto one as a model, and I would personally try to look at that as an objective.
Can we
to-
hire
to
two
reach.
interns to align them back to the municipal code too? I'm just kidding. That would be nice, though. So.
Yes, the next budget cycle. we can
Next
ask for
budget
that.
cycle. So, it'd be a good exercise at some point. I'm probably going to do that myself and just go through these.
One thing I did mention, I don't know if I have any support on this, but I would like to see the HCD papers added to this so that we have everything all together. You've already done it, so that shouldn't be a big issue. All right, thank you.
All right. Well, hey, I'd like to thank thank the staff for putting this together. Look forward to what the work product looks like in the next cycle. Thank you very much. I think we have no other comments here. So let's move on to any staff and commission reports. I don't think we have any public hearings, old business or new business, so let's move to staff and commission reports.
There are no additional staff report.
Okay. No other staff reports? All right, well, I'd like to take some time here just real quickly. I know this is unusual to leave before 9:30, so we're going to try hard not to. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to put thoughts and prayers to those that are in the Northern California fires. I think this is very critical, especially in the Bay Area, given what's happening there. And so for those who can go out and help or volunteer or provide shelter assistance, I think there's a lot of help being sought out at the moment. There have been a lot of folks who have just finished rebuilding from the last fire and are encountering this again. So I think there's going to be a lot of support that's going to be required from all communities in the Bay Area. So just something I want to put out there. Anything else? All right, we're going to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.